The gala was supposed to be just another night of seduction, power, and control. But tonight, something changed, and it wasn't supposed to. Amelia Harper walked into the room, and suddenly, everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my future, was in question. I wasn't used to women like her. Strong, unaffected by my wealth, untouched by my charm. But I was about to learn that underestimating her would be my biggest mistake. I knew my Uncle Samuel had secrets. I didn't expect this one. Amelia's father wasn't just a professor. He had a history with my family. A history that could destroy everything we've worked for. I had to know. I had to get closer to her. But the closer I got, the more I uncovered about my family's dark past, and the more I realized I was in deeper than I could ever escape. Stay with me. Because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about love, family, and power. You won't believe the truth behind my uncle's empire. Don't miss the next twist. Subscribe now to be the first to know how this story ends. The gala was nothing new for me. An endless parade of smiles, handshakes, and polished personas. Everyone in that room knew exactly what they were there for. Connections, power, the illusion of wealth. But when I saw her, something shifted. Amelia Harper. She didn't belong here. At least not in the way everyone else did. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, her presence barely noticed by the people who had their eyes on the latest deal or the next favor they could collect. But I noticed her. Her eyes, dark and steady, as if nothing in this glittering world could rattle her. I couldn't help but watch as she made her way through the room, quietly rejecting the attention of every man who tried to engage her. And for the first time in years, I felt something I didn't expect. Something like unease. I approached her, my usual charm ready, the smooth words rehearsed 1,000 times. But when I spoke, she barely flinched. "Amelia, isn't it? I don't think we've met." I could feel the weight of her gaze as she looked me over, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, but no trace of admiration. She gave me a polite smile, cold, measured. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Pierce." Her voice was soft, but it carried a strength that made me pause. She didn't look at me like everyone else did. She didn't see a millionaire or a businessman. She saw just another man. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched between us, thick with something I couldn't place. I wasn't used to this. "So," I said, trying to regain my footing, "what brings you to a place like this?" Her smile remained, but her eyes held a challenge. "My father's friend. He's a good man. I thought I should show up for him." My jaw tightened. Samuel Pierce, my uncle. Always the one to bring people together with his wealth, his influence. The man who never failed to have a seat at the table, even when the rest of us had to fight to keep ours. But something in the way she said "good man" stopped me. She wasn't here for the spectacle. She wasn't here to network. She wasn't even here for her own benefit. She was here because she cared about something real. Something that had nothing to do with the games we played. That was the moment I realized. She wasn't like the other women in my world. She wasn't a pawn to be seduced, controlled, or discarded. No, Amelia Harper wasn't playing by the same rules. And for the first time in years, I felt out of control. I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered. And as the night wore on, I found myself drawn to her more and more. Every time I tried to walk away, I was pulled back in. She wasn't like anyone else I'd ever met, and I couldn't shake the feeling that meeting her meant something I wasn't ready to face. I leaned in a little closer, lowering my voice. "You know, I don't usually like these events either, but my uncle insists. If you're not careful, you'll get stuck talking to people you don't care about for hours." Her lips twitched in amusement. "Is that what this is? A trap?" She tilted her head, looking at me with quiet curiosity, as if she could see right through me. She didn't seem afraid of me. She didn't seem impressed either. "Something like that," I said, my words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But I've always been good at finding my way out of traps." She gave me a soft, knowing smile. I'll be sure to remember that. And just like that, she was gone again, slipping back into the crowd, moving with a grace that seemed to defy the world around her. I stood there, alone in the middle of the gala, suddenly aware of how much space I had to fill, how much noise there was, and how much I wished I could follow her. But I didn't. Instead, I turned back to the crowd, pretending everything was still normal. But in the back of my mind, Amelia Harper was the only thing I could think about. It had been days since the gala, but I couldn't shake the image of her, the way she moved through the crowd, her eyes steady and unflinching. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, standing there, so different from the women I knew, different from everyone else. I told myself I'd forgotten about her. After all, I had better things to focus on: business deals, family matters, my empire. But every time I was alone, her face drifted into my mind. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was used to being the one in control, used to being the man who decided who got attention, who didn't. But Amelia Harper? She didn't care about any of that. She wasn't a game I could win. But there was something else, something more pressing than my pride. The curiosity. I needed to know more about her, needed to understand what made her tick. A week later, I found myself back in Savannah, Georgia, the very place I'd vowed to never visit again. It wasn't the city I had a problem with. It was the memories. My family's history, our past. It felt like the weight of those memories hung over everything here, suffocating me. But I had a reason to be here. A reason that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with Amelia. I parked in front of a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of town. Maxwell Hale's home. Amelia's father. The man I'd heard about in hushed conversations. The one who had a history with my uncle. The one whose life had been upended by my family's secrets. I wasn't sure what I expected when I knocked on the door. Part of me thought I might be wasting my time, snooping around in places I shouldn't be. But there was a nagging voice in my head telling me I had to. That I had to understand who she really was. Maxwell opened the door, his face lined with age and wisdom. His eyes were sharp, as if he had been expecting me. "Logan Pierce," he said, his voice steady but not unfriendly. "I had a feeling you'd come here sooner or later." I didn't know how to respond. "I'm looking for answers," I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. "About Amelia. About her family." Maxwell studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He was a man who had seen the world for what it truly was, the good and the bad. He wasn't someone who was easily impressed or easily fooled. "Come in," he said finally. "We have a lot to talk about." Inside, the house was filled with bookshelves stacked with old novels, dusty papers, and photographs of a life lived with purpose, not money. The place smelled of aged wood and leather, the kind of scent that made you feel like time had stopped here, as if Maxwell Hale had turned away from the world outside and retreated into this quiet refuge. I sat across from him at a small wooden table, the kind you'd find in a house that had seen decades of history. Maxwell didn't waste any time. "You're here because of her, aren't you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Amelia." I nodded. "She's different," I said, struggling to find the right words. "She's not like the others I know." Maxwell didn't speak for a moment. Then, his voice low and measured, he said, "She never was. Amelia's life has always been about more than wealth and power. She's always had a sense of justice, a desire to do what's right, even when it means standing against the world." He paused, then added, "Even against her own family." I wasn't prepared for that. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I thought I knew what I was walking into, but this was something else entirely. "Your uncle, Samuel," Maxwell continued, "is a man who's made his fortune by stepping on people. He's always been good at that. But Amelia's father, he couldn't stand by and let that continue. He tried to expose Samuel for the man he really was, and for that, he lost everything." The weight of those words hung in the air between us. I had heard whispers about my uncle, about the secrets he kept buried. But hearing it from Amelia's father, hearing it so plainly, it made everything feel real. Maxwell continued, "Amelia doesn't know the full extent of her father's sacrifice. She only knows what I've told her. But she's lived with the burden of his actions all her life. And now, because of that history, she's tied to a future she can't escape. I sat back, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together in my mind. Amelia, with all her quiet strength, wasn't just some innocent woman from a small town. She was a part of something much bigger than any of us could have imagined. I never wanted this for her, Maxwell said, his voice breaking slightly. But the past doesn't let go that easily. I was starting to understand. Amelia's life wasn't just about the attraction I felt for her. She was a woman burdened by her past, a past I was now a part of. The more I uncovered, the more tangled our lives became. My family, my uncle, Amelia. None of us could escape the threads that bound us together. But there was something else, something deeper. In the quiet moments we had shared, I'd seen the real Amelia. The woman who cared about more than just her family's name, more than just the wealth that had been thrust upon her. She had her own sense of right and wrong, and that was what made her dangerous. Not to me, but to everything I'd built. I left Maxwell's house with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Amelia wasn't just some innocent bystander in this game. She was a part of it. And I was falling for her, faster than I had ever fallen for anyone. But the stakes were higher now. Amelia's past was pulling us both in directions we couldn't control. And the closer I got, the more I realized, this wasn't just about me and her anymore. It was about everything we stood to lose. The more I learned about Amelia, the more I realized how little I actually knew. She wasn't just the woman who made me feel vulnerable. She wasn't just some innocent bystander in a world of wealth and power. No, Amelia Harper had a past that was tied to mine, whether either of us liked it or not. The truth hit me like a cold slap. I had never asked myself why she seemed so different, why her indifference to my wealth felt more like a shield than a challenge. But now, after speaking with her father, Maxwell Hale, I began to understand the weight she carried. She had spent her life trying to outrun the ghosts of her family, and I, like an idiot, had stepped right into her path. The following days felt like a blur. I spent my time obsessing over the fragments of information I had gathered, each new detail about Amelia's family, each new lie my uncle had told me. Every time I thought I had a grip on the situation, it slipped further away. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Maxwell. What had he meant by, "She's tied to a future she can't escape"? What had my uncle done to ruin this girl's life? And why was I so determined to find out? I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something stronger. A compulsion. A need to fix what had been broken. So, I did what I always did when I needed answers. I took matters into my own hands. I arranged a meeting with Samuel Pierce, my uncle, the man who had always been the pillar of my world. I needed to understand why his past was tied so intricately to Amelia's. There were too many secrets swirling around, and I was done being in the dark. We met in his private office, the place where he did his real work, the place where his empire came alive. The heavy mahogany desk sat between us like a wall, but there was no escaping the tension in the air. I knew this conversation was going to be dangerous. I wasn't just asking about business anymore. I was asking about his past. And Samuel Pierce wasn't the type of man who took kindly to questions about things he didn't want you to know. "Uncle," I began, my voice steady but filled with intent. "There's something I need to know. About Amelia." Samuel didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, cool and calculated, as always. "Amelia Harper?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You've spent too much time with her already. She's not who you think she is, Logan." His words were carefully measured, but they hit me harder than I expected. I felt my pulse quicken. "She's not who I think she is?" I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "Then who is she?" Samuel's gaze hardened. "She's a complication, a reminder of a past I buried a long time ago." I pressed harder, not backing down. "A past? What happened between you two?" Samuel's eyes flicked toward the window, his gaze distant. "I did what I had to do, Logan. Sometimes the price of success is higher than you realize. You'll understand when you get older. But Amelia, Her father made sure things got complicated. I leaned forward, my frustration growing. I need to know what happened. Why is she involved in all this? Samuel sighed, the weight of his secrets settling in the air between us. Because, Logan, her father was a whistleblower. He knew things about me, about the business, that could have ruined everything. I didn't have a choice. We couldn't afford to let him expose us. The room seemed to close in around me as the pieces finally began to fall into place. Amelia's family wasn't just some casualty in my uncle's rise to power. They were a threat that my uncle had eradicated with cold precision. Amelia's father had risked everything to expose the corruption that had allowed Samuel to build his empire, and for that, he had been silenced. Maxwell Hale wasn't just a professor, I said softly, the realization settling in. He was trying to destroy everything you built. Samuel's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a coldness that I had never seen before. I did what I had to do. Business isn't personal, Logan. It's survival. I stood there frozen. Every word he spoke felt like a nail in the coffin of my world. The uncle I had always admired, the man I had followed blindly for years, was a fraud. A man who had sacrificed families, people, lives, to build his empire. And now, Amelia Harper was the final piece of the puzzle. She had no idea how deeply her life was entangled in all of this. The man she looked up to, the one who had guided her, had shattered her future, and all without her knowledge. But I knew one thing for sure now. I couldn't stay away from her. Not after all of this. I had to protect her. I had to make things right. I turned to leave, but Samuel's voice stopped me. "You can't save her, Logan," he said, his tone cutting through the air. "You're already in too deep, and there's no going back." But I wasn't done yet. Samuel didn't understand who he was dealing with. I wasn't just his nephew anymore. I wasn't some puppet. I was a man who had seen the truth, the real truth, and there was no turning back for me either. Amelia Harper had no idea what she was about to face, and I didn't care if I had to tear apart my family to protect her. I was going to make sure she had the future she deserved, even if it meant destroying everything I thought I knew. The days after that conversation felt like they stretched into infinity. I couldn't stop thinking about what Samuel had said, the cold truth about the Hale family's past, and the role Amelia played in all of it. The more I learned, the more tangled everything became. Amelia had no idea how deeply she was embedded in the world I'd spent my whole life building. A world of wealth, power, and lies. She had no clue that the very family she thought was her protector was the same one that had ripped apart her own family. My family. And I was no better than any of them. But that didn't stop me from wanting her. I couldn't ignore it. Amelia was everything I had never wanted in a woman. She was simple, grounded, untouched by the pursuit of status or power. But she was also stronger than any woman I had ever met. In the quiet moments we spent together, talking about books, art, and life, she had a way of seeing the world that made mine seem small and shallow. I found myself seeking her out more and more, needing to be around her, needing to hear her voice. But every time we spoke, I could feel the distance between us. She was still keeping something from me, and that kept me on edge, wondering just how much more of her past was tied to mine, how much I still didn't know. I arranged another meeting with her, this time not in the chaos of a gala or a social setting, but in the quiet of her apartment. The place wasn't much, just a small, cozy space with bookshelves that reached the ceiling and soft, mismatched furniture that made it feel like a home, not just a place to sleep. The contrast to my life could not have been more stark. She greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, as though she was bracing for something she didn't want to face. "Logan," she said, stepping aside so I could enter. "What's this about?" I could feel the tension in the air. "We need to talk," I said, my voice more serious than I intended. "About everything. About us." She led me to the small kitchen, where she poured 2 glasses of wine, just a simple red, not something expensive, not something that screamed wealth. I watched her pour it, her hands steady, her eyes avoiding mine. She wasn't ready for this conversation, but I knew it had to happen. We couldn't keep dancing around the truth forever. Amelia, I began, my voice soft but steady. I can't stop thinking about you. And it's not just because you're different. You have a past, a history that's tied to mine in ways you don't even know. And I need you to tell me what you're not saying. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes were downcast, the weight of the words heavy between us. She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, as if weighing her options. I already told you, she said quietly. My father and your uncle. They have a history. You know that. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is that you're keeping something from me. I cut in, my voice more forceful than I intended. Amelia, I've seen how hard you've fought to keep your life separate from your father's mistakes. But I can't protect you from this world that you're tangled in, if you keep hiding the truth. She finally looked up at me, her gaze piercing, but there was pain in her eyes. You don't understand, she said softly. I don't want to be part of this. I never did. But it's all I've ever known. I thought if I kept my distance, kept my head down, I could escape it. But you've brought me back into it. You've forced me to face things I'm not ready to confront. I stepped closer to her, reaching out to gently touch her arm. I didn't ask for this either, but now that we're here, I'm not going to back away. I won't let you go through this alone. Her eyes flickered with something, hope, maybe, or something more like doubt. She pulled away slightly, the distance between us widening. You don't get it, Logan, she whispered, shaking her head. You think you're in control. That's what you do best. But this is bigger than both of us. You're asking me to trust you, but I can't. Not yet. Not until I know you're ready to accept the truth about my family. About your family. It hit me like a cold wave, the realization that this wasn't just about us. Amelia was right. This wasn't a simple love story. This was about families at war. And I had no idea how deep the battle went until now. I'm ready, I said, more to myself than to her. I'm ready to face whatever truth you have. I'll stand with you. But you have to let me in, Amelia. You have to trust me. She didn't respond right away. Her silence was deafening. But then, almost as if she had made a decision in that moment, she nodded once. All right, but it won't be easy, Logan, and it won't be quick. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to fight for this. For her. No matter what it cost me. No matter what secrets came to light. Amelia had just cracked open a door to her past, and I was going to walk through it, no matter how dark it might get. Because for the first time, I realized that I didn't just want her. I needed her. The air between us was thick with unspoken truths, the kind that gnawed at the edges of your mind and didn't let go. I left Amelia's apartment that night with more questions than answers, the uncertainty eating away at me. I had told her I was ready to face the truth, but in my gut, I knew I wasn't prepared for what was coming. And deep down, I wondered if I ever would be. I spent the next few days trying to piece together the fragments of the story Amelia had just started to unfold. I went over every word I had spoken with her, every glance, every hesitation. There was still so much she hadn't said. But I could feel it. There was a deep well of secrets in her life that she was holding back. Secrets that were tied to my family in ways I couldn't yet understand. I decided I needed answers. No more waiting. No more dancing around the truth. So, I went to Samuel Pierce, my uncle. He was the key to all of this. The man who had spent years building an empire on power and corruption. If anyone knew the full extent of what had happened between his family and Amelia's, it was him. I arrived at his office that afternoon, just as the sun was setting over New York City, casting a golden glow through the windows. The light made everything seem clean, pristine, but I knew better. I knew what lurked behind the polished veneer of his empire. "Uncle," I said, as I walked in, my tone as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. Samuel looked up from his desk, his face impassive as ever. But I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew this wasn't a casual visit. "Logan," he greeted me with a tight smile. "I trust everything is going well?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. "You've been keeping things from me. Things about Amelia, about her father." Samuel's smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough. Enough for me to see that I was on the right track. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes calculating. "Amelia's father was a threat, Logan," Samuel said, his voice low, measured. "A threat to everything we've built. Her father knew too much. He was a man of principle, someone who couldn't be bought or silenced. He had to be removed." I clenched my fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Removed?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You didn't just remove him from the picture, did you?" Samuel's eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time, I saw a shadow of guilt cross his face. "He had to be dealt with," he repeated, as though the words didn't quite sit right with him either. Maxwell Hale's silence came at a cost, but it wasn't just for us. It was for him, too. I could feel the weight of the words pressing down on me. "What do you mean? What happened to him?" Samuel looked away, his gaze hardening. "I can't tell you everything. But know this, Logan. Maxwell Hale had to disappear. He was getting too close to the truth. And Amelia, she's carrying the remnants of that truth. She's part of a legacy, whether she likes it or not." I stood frozen, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. My uncle wasn't just talking about business, about power. He was talking about lives, real lives, ruined in his pursuit of control. Amelia was a casualty in a war that had been fought long before I had ever even known her. "You destroyed her family," I whispered, the weight of the words hitting me harder than I expected. Samuel looked at me, his eyes cold and unreadable. "I did what I had to do, Logan. We all do. This is how the world works." But for me, the world had just been shattered. The truth was no longer a simple matter of power. It was about corruption, manipulation, and the people who suffered because of it. And Amelia, she was the one left holding the pieces. I left my uncle's office feeling like I had been dragged through a storm. Everything I had thought I understood about my family, about who I was crumbling. But one thing was clear. I couldn't walk away from this. Not now. I had to protect Amelia. And I had to make things right. Not just for her, but for the people who had been crushed under the weight of my family's empire. The guilt that had been creeping into my bones for weeks was now a heavy burden, and I couldn't shake it. I had been a part of this, and I wasn't going to let Amelia face it alone. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. I had no idea what I was about to uncover. But there was no turning back now. As I made my way to the elevator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Amelia. "I know what you're doing, Logan, and I know what you're about to find out. But you need to stop. It's not safe anymore." My heart sank. I had no idea how much danger she was in. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was coming, I was going to be right beside her. We were in this together now. The message lingered in my mind, the weight of Amelia's words pulling me back from the brink. "I know what you're doing, Logan, and I know what you're about to find out. But you need to stop. It's not safe anymore." Not safe? She didn't understand. She was already in this deeper than she realized, and I was too. I couldn't walk away from her. Not now. Not when I knew the full extent of what my family had done to hers. But I couldn't stop thinking about her warning. It's not safe anymore. That was when I realized just how much danger we were both in. I had stepped into a world I thought I understood, but I was just beginning to scratch the surface of a much larger, darker truth. I couldn't risk losing her. Not because of my family's legacy, not because of some buried past. And I certainly couldn't let her face this alone. But as I sat in my office that evening, looking out over the city that had always felt like my kingdom, I realized I was playing a game with no rules, and the stakes were higher than I ever anticipated. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. This time, it was Samuel Pierce, my uncle. The message was simple. Meet me at the club. I'll be waiting. I knew that tone. It was the tone that meant he wasn't just offering a conversation. He was offering a proposition. And from the look in his eyes the last time we spoke, I knew it wouldn't be anything I could walk away from easily. I wasn't just any place. It was a hidden den of deals, whispers, and threats. It was where Samuel did his real business, where the powerful gathered away from the public eye. I had been there before, many times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, I was walking into a trap of my own making. When I entered, the air was thick with smoke and the low hum of conversations. I could see my uncle at the back, seated at a private table. His sharp, calculating gaze met mine as I approached. His fingers were drumming lightly on the table, his usual calm demeanor belying the weight of what he was about to say. "You're here," Samuel said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. "I knew you would be. But I'm not sure you're prepared for what you're about to hear." I didn't sit immediately. I stood, staring down at him, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I don't have time for games, Uncle. What do you want?" He smiled, too calmly for my taste. "I'm offering you a deal, Logan. A deal you're going to have to take if you want to protect yourself. And her. Her. Amelia." I clenched my jaw, but I didn't interrupt. I needed to hear what he was offering, what he was willing to do to keep me quiet. "You've dug too deep, Logan," Samuel continued. "And now, you're in over your head. There are people involved in this, people you don't want to cross. I can help you out. I can protect you. But I need something from you in return." The words hit me like a slap. Protection? He was talking about power, leverage. He wasn't going to let me walk away from this, not without a price. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, knowing the answer would bind me even further to the mess I had stepped into. Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully, as if he were savoring this moment. "I need you to walk away from Amelia, Logan. I need you to stop pursuing her, stop digging into her family's history. If you do that, I'll make sure you don't have to face the consequences of your little investigation." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Walk away from her? Stop digging into her family's past? It was the one thing I couldn't do. Not after everything I had learned. Not after everything I had felt for her. "You're asking me to betray her," I said, my voice low, a growl barely contained. Samuel's eyes were cold. "Not just her, Logan. You're asking to protect yourself, to protect the family. Don't you get it? If you don't do this, it'll be the end of everything you've built, the end of the life you know." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was everything I had ever wanted, the protection, the power, the comfort of my family's name. But it came at a cost. It came at the cost of Amelia. I looked at my uncle, my stomach twisting into knots. Protect her. Or protect myself. "Logan," Samuel said, his voice softer now, as though he was trying to convince me. "You know how this world works. You're already in too deep. Take the deal, and this all goes away. You can walk away from this mess without anyone even noticing." But I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure if I could walk away. I knew what I had to do. My uncle wasn't offering me a way out. He was offering a way in. A deeper hole to dig, a price to pay for my silence. And I wasn't willing to accept it. "You don't get it, Uncle," I said, my voice steady now, filled with a strength I didn't know I had. "I'm not walking away. I'm not turning my back on Amelia. And I'm not going to let you destroy her life any more than you already have." His eyes narrowed, the icy calm of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. "Then you're making a mistake, Logan," he warned, his tone hardening. "A very costly mistake." I turned on my heel, leaving the table behind me. The weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. I had a mission, a purpose, and whatever Samuel threatened, whatever danger came my way, I wasn't going to stop. I was going to protect Amelia, no matter what. The walk back to my penthouse felt like a dream, or maybe more like a nightmare. The city's lights blurred together, merging with the thoughts spinning through my head. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My uncle, Samuel, had offered me everything: wealth, power, protection, but at the cost of Amelia's future. And I refused it. I wasn't sure if I was making the right choice, but there was no going back now. I was committed, for better or worse. But the weight of the decision was pressing down on me, heavy and unrelenting. I thought I understood the world I lived in, how it worked, who I had to be to succeed. But when it came to Amelia, nothing made sense anymore. She had this way of challenging everything I believed in, everything I had built. She was pure in a way I wasn't sure I could ever be, and that scared me. But it wasn't just her innocence that pulled me in. It was the fire beneath it. The strength I saw in her, the quiet defiance against a world that had wronged her. She wasn't just a woman to be won. She was a force. And now, I had to make sure she was safe. I had to get to the bottom of this, even if it meant losing everything else in the process. That night, I couldn't sleep. The unanswered questions, the uncertainty, everything was swirling in my mind, demanding to be addressed. So I did what I always did when I needed answers. I went straight to the source. I texted Amelia. "We need to talk. Meet me at my place tonight, 9 p.m., please." There was no hesitation in my message. I knew she was going to be upset, but this wasn't a conversation that could wait. She arrived right on time. When she walked through the door, I could see it in her eyes. She had been thinking about everything too. She knew this wasn't just some casual talk. This was about more than just us. "You wanted to talk?" she asked, her voice cautious, but I could see the edge in it. "Yeah," I said, my voice more controlled than I felt. "I need you to tell me everything. I need to know about your father, everything that happened between him and my uncle." Amelia's eyes flickered with hesitation, and for a moment, I could see the walls she had built around herself start to rise. But then, she let out a soft sigh, and her posture softened. "Logan," she said quietly, "you're not going to like what you hear." I walked over to the bar and poured us both a glass of whiskey. "I'm not here to judge you, Amelia. I need to know the truth. Whatever that is." She stood there for a moment, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of her hair. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father was never just a professor, Logan. He didn't just teach history or philosophy. He spent years researching a network of corruption, a system that my father believed was running through our government and large corporations. He stumbled onto something that connected people like your uncle, to illegal operations. And when he realized what he had, he decided to expose it." The words hit me like a slap. My uncle, Samuel, was at the center of all of it. The corruption, the lies. And it wasn't just business. It was bigger than that. My whole world, everything I thought I knew, had been built on a lie. Amelia continued, her voice steady now, but I could hear the pain in it. "My father tried to go to the authorities, tried to expose what was happening, but they came for him first. They made sure he disappeared." "So, that's why your father is gone? Because of what he knew?" Amelia nodded slowly. "Yes. And now, all these years later, I'm here. I never wanted this life, Logan. I never asked for any of it. But it's a part of me, and I can't escape it." Everything inside me screamed that I had to fix this. I couldn't let my family's empire swallow Amelia whole. But there was so much I didn't understand, so much I still had to uncover. "I won't let you face this alone," I said, stepping closer to her. "I swear to you, I'll do whatever it takes to get the truth out. We'll make sure your father's story is heard. We'll make sure your family is free from this." She looked at me, eyes filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You don't know what you're getting into, Logan." "I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I'm not backing down." The air between us felt charged, the kind of silence that only came when two people realized they were standing at the edge of something. Something big, something dangerous. Amelia reached out, her hand trembling slightly as it brushed against mine. "I want to believe you," she whispered. But I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. You can trust me, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. I'll prove it. We didn't speak much after that, but we didn't need to. We both understood what was coming. The truth was out there, buried in the shadows of my family's past, and I was going to drag it into the light, no matter what the cost. As Amelia left that night, I watched her disappear into the darkness, but this time, I wasn't afraid of what was ahead. The truth, however ugly, had to be uncovered, and I was going to make sure of it. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Everything I had built, everything I had worked for, seemed to crumble a little more with each passing day. Every time I thought I had a grip on the situation, something new would come to light. I had started to piece together my uncle's involvement in Amelia's father's disappearance, but what I didn't expect was how deep the rot went. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't just about power or business. It was about control, about holding secrets so tightly that they could destroy anyone who got too close. And I was getting too close. Amelia was different now. Her walls were up higher than ever before. Every time I tried to comfort her, to reassure her that I could protect her from the storm we were both caught in, she pulled away. She was torn between trusting me and shielding me from the dangers that loomed ahead. I knew she was afraid. I saw it in the way she looked at me, like she was afraid I wouldn't be able to handle the truth. And the truth, I knew, was worse than anything we could have imagined. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office, going through documents, trying to piece together the information I had gathered. It was late in the day when I got the call. "Mr. Pierce." The voice on the other end was shaky, urgent. "You need to come quickly. It's about Amelia." The blood drained from my face. "What happened?" I demanded, already grabbing my coat. She's been taken." I didn't wait for more details. My mind was already racing. Taken? By who? Why? I rushed out of the office, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. My mind was consumed with fear and frustration. How had I let things get so far? How had I failed her? I reached her apartment in less than 20 minutes. The door was ajar, and my heart sank in my chest. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her belongings, her things were exactly where they should have been. But Amelia was gone. I scanned the room, my mind running through every possible scenario. Then, I saw it. A single piece of paper on the coffee table, folded neatly in half. I grabbed it, unfolded it quickly, and read the words scrawled in bold, messy handwriting. "We have her. If you want her back, you'll have to play by our rules. You know where to find us." My blood ran cold. The message was clear. Someone had taken Amelia, and they wanted something from me. But what? What did they want? And then it hit me. Samuel. I should have known it wasn't over. I should have known my uncle wouldn't let go of what I was uncovering. If he knew what I was planning, if he knew how far I was willing to go to protect Amelia, then he'd stop at nothing to erase me from the picture. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. My mind flashed back to that night at the club, to the deal Samuel had offered me. Walk away, and you'll be safe. But now, there was no walking away. I had made my choice. I picked up my phone and dialed Amelia's number, hoping for a miracle. No answer. I called again, but the line was dead. I was running out of options. But then I remembered something. A place. A hidden meeting spot Samuel had used in the past, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, quiet, remote, and perfect for deals that needed to stay under the radar. I wasn't sure if Amelia was there, but it was the only lead I had. I arrived at the warehouse in record time. The place was abandoned, quiet. I knew this wasn't the kind of spot you just walked into without a plan. But I didn't have time for subtlety. I had no intention of playing by anyone's rules but my own. I walked through the entrance, my footsteps echoing in the empty hall. And then I heard it, the faint sound of voices from a distance. I moved toward the sound, adrenaline surging in my veins. Every second felt like an eternity. When I turned the corner, I saw them. It wasn't just Samuel standing there. There were others, men I didn't recognize, dressed in dark clothing, their faces shadowed by the low light. And in the center of it all, standing between two of them, was Amelia. She looked terrified, her eyes wide with fear, but she was holding her ground. I could see her trying to stay strong, but I could also see the tremble in her hands. I didn't think, I just acted. I lunged forward, knocking one of the men aside and grabbing Amelia, pulling her close. "Logan," she gasped, her voice shaking. "You shouldn't be here. You need to leave." But I wasn't going anywhere. I turned to face the men who were still standing there, their hands ready to move. "Get the hell away from her." They didn't move at first, but one of them, the leader, stepped forward, his voice calm but full of venom. "You shouldn't have come here, Pierce. You've got no idea what you're dealing with. If you think your uncle's power is going to save you now, you're wrong. This goes far beyond anything you could imagine." I tightened my grip on Amelia, pulling her closer. "You want something from me? Fine. But you'll have to go through me first." The man laughed, the sound cold and mocking. "You're too late. This was never about you, Pierce. This was about Amelia. And now, we have what we need." It wasn't just a kidnapping. It wasn't just about getting to me. It was a warning. And I realized, too late, that I had underestimated just how deep the conspiracy ran. This wasn't just about family or power. This was about something bigger, a game I had been dragged into, and I was playing right into their hands. My heart hammered in my chest, the pounding rhythm drowning out the world around me. I hadn't planned for this. None of this had been in the script I'd written for myself. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away. Not this time. Amelia was in danger, and the moment I let that sink in, every part of me that had once been filled with uncertainty, every shred of hesitation, vanished. I wasn't just fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for my soul, for what was left of it. The men around me were still. The leader, the one who had spoken earlier, eyed me with a mix of amusement and disdain. His confidence was a weapon, and in that moment, I realized how outmatched I was. "You're making a mistake, Pierce," he said, his tone calm, almost condescending. "You can't stop what's coming. You're already too deep in the game." His words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. He was right in one way. This game had already swallowed me whole, but I wasn't going to let it swallow her too. "I don't care about your game," I growled, my voice filled with the kind of fury I hadn't known I had in me. "You touch her again, and you'll regret it." Amelia's hand trembled in mine, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and something else, something softer. Hope, maybe. She was so used to standing alone, fighting her own battles, but now she was here with me. We were in this together, whether either of us was ready for it or not. The leader of the group took a step forward, his hand reaching into his coat pocket. I could feel the tension in the room rise, thickening with every movement. But this wasn't just about a fight anymore. This was about everything I had worked for, everything I had built, tearing apart in front of me. The man pulled out an envelope, and as he opened it, he tossed it onto the floor in front of me. It was thick with papers, documents, photographs. As I bent down to pick it up, my mind raced. "This is your future," the man said, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "And Amelia's." I glanced down at the papers, my stomach churning as I flipped through them. They were photographs, shots of my family, my Uncle Samuel, surrounded by dark figures I didn't recognize. Men in suits, with faces I'd never seen before. And then, there it was, a document outlining an offshore account, a trail of money that led back to my uncle's business dealings, the same ones that had once threatened to take everything from Amelia's family. My heart dropped into my stomach. This wasn't just about Amelia anymore. This was about power, about corruption that ran so deep I had no idea how far it stretched. My uncle's empire wasn't just built on business. It was built on deception, on blackmail, on threats, and I was standing in the middle of it. The game they were talking about was more than just my family's empire. It was about control, about who could be bought and who couldn't be. And I had always believed I was untouchable. I thought I could play the game, win it, and walk away when I chose. But now I saw the truth. There were no winners in this game. Just those who played, and those who were destroyed by it. "Amelia," I whispered, turning to her. "We need to get out of here. Now." Her eyes were wide, but she nodded, her grip tightening on my hand. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She could feel it too. The darkness that was swallowing us whole. I turned, ready to lead us out of the warehouse, but the leader's voice stopped me in my tracks. "You think you can just walk away?" he sneered. "You're in too deep, and you're not going anywhere." I turned back to face him, my voice cold and certain. "Watch me." In that moment, I wasn't just fighting for Amelia. I was fighting for everything I had left in me. The part of me that wasn't going to let this darkness consume us. The part of me that refused to bend, to break, no matter what Samuel or anyone else threw my way. I stepped forward, pulling Amelia behind me, and as I did, the tension snapped. The men moved, trying to close in, but I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to run anymore. I wasn't going to let fear dictate my choices. With one quick motion, I knocked the first man aside, throwing myself in front of Amelia, shielding her from whatever came next. And then, the sound of sirens broke through the stillness. The police had arrived. I had no idea who called them, but I didn't care. All I knew was that this moment, the one where everything could have gone wrong, had finally turned in our favor. The leader's face twisted in fury as he backed away, his men hesitating behind him. "This isn't over," he spat. "You've made a huge mistake, Pierce." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The sirens were enough. With the police closing in, I turned to Amelia, my chest heaving as I caught my breath. She was shaken, but her eyes were clear, focused. She wasn't the same woman I had met weeks ago. Neither of us were. "We're not done," I said, my voice quiet but fierce. "But we're one step closer to ending this. To ending everything they've done." She nodded, her hands squeezing mine. "One step closer." But even as the police took the men away, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had taken down one part of the empire, but the rest was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. Amelia and I weren't just fighting for our lives anymore. We were fighting for the truth, for justice, and for a future that neither of us had ever imagined possible. But I wouldn't stop until I'd uncovered every last secret, until I'd broken every chain that had bound us both to this world of lies. And I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that the fight was just beginning. The city felt different as I walked beside Amelia in the cold night air. We were surrounded by flashing police lights, the sound of sirens still ringing in my ears, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The tension in the air hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had grown thicker, heavier. I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The police were taking care of the men in the warehouse, but that didn't mean we were safe. Not yet. I knew it wasn't over. Samuel Pierce had always been a man who played for keeps, and I had no doubt he would do whatever it took to erase any trace of the truth. I wasn't just a pawn in his game anymore. I was a target. I kept my eyes on Amelia as we walked, her hand still clutched in mine. She didn't speak, and neither did I. There was nothing to say. We both understood the gravity of the situation. We were in too deep, and it was only a matter of time before the real fight began. The next morning I went to my office, trying to make sense of what had happened. The police had gotten some of the men into custody, but I knew they were only small pieces of the puzzle. Samuel's empire ran deep. This was far from them. I sat at my desk, scanning through the documents I had collected. My mind kept returning to the same question. Why had Samuel let things go this far? He had a history of protecting his own interests. So why had he let me get so close to uncovering everything? Was it a mistake? Or was he playing me from the beginning? I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I needed one. I reached for my phone, dialing the number of an old contact, a journalist I'd worked with in the past, someone who could help me get access to the public records I needed. She answered on the second ring. "Logan?" Her voice was sharp, familiar. "What's this about?" "I need information. About my uncle. About his business dealings. I know there's something out there. Something I'm missing," I said, my words clipped with urgency. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a low chuckle. "You're digging in places you shouldn't be, Logan. You know that, right?" "I don't have a choice," I replied, the frustration in my tone rising. Amelia's life is on the line, and if I don't do something about this, it's only going to get worse. The silence stretched, and then she sighed. Fine, I'll see what I can find. But you're playing with fire here. There are people who won't just stop at taking down your uncle, Logan. They'll burn everything in their path to protect their secrets. I know, I said softly, my mind already racing through the possibilities. But I have to try. Later that day, I met with her in a small cafe on the edge of the city. She slid a folder across the table, her eyes darting nervously around the room. This is what you asked for, she said quietly. But be careful, Logan. There's more here than you realize. I opened the folder, scanning the papers inside. It was a mix of financial records, email chains, and handwritten notes. At first, nothing jumped out at me. But then I came across something. An email exchange between Samuel and a third party, someone I hadn't heard of before. Jonathan Ward. Ward wasn't just any name. He was a businessman with ties to illegal arms deals and underground markets. Someone who had a reputation for disappearing people who got too close to his business. The email thread was brief, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Samuel hadn't just been playing with power. He'd been involved in something far darker, something much bigger than I'd ever imagined, and I had unwittingly walked right into it. Amelia's father hadn't just been silenced for uncovering financial corruption. He had been silenced because he was digging into something far more dangerous, something connected to international crime. And Samuel's ties to Ward were the key to it all. I sat back, the folder still in my hands. My mind was spinning. I had never considered the possibility that my uncle's empire wasn't just about greed. It was about survival in a world where power wasn't measured by wealth alone. I had to tell Amelia. She needed to know. But even as I thought about that, I hesitated. If I told her everything, if I exposed her to this side of her father's past, would she still want to be with me? Would she trust me? Or would it break her? I didn't have the answer, but I knew I couldn't keep her in the dark any longer. The stakes were too high, and the truth was too dangerous. That night, I went to Amelia's apartment. When she opened the door, I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew something had changed. I could feel it in the air. I found something, I said, my voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything I had just uncovered. I need to show you. Amelia stepped aside, allowing me in, but there was a wariness in her posture. She was waiting, preparing herself for the worst. I sat down across from her, the folder in my hands like a ticking bomb. I found out more about your father, I began, my voice quiet. It's not just business, Amelia. He was involved in something much bigger. And your family, my uncle's empire. It's not just about power or money. It's about something darker. Amelia's eyes narrowed, the walls rising again. What do you mean? Your father wasn't just trying to expose corruption. He was trying to stop something much worse. He was digging into international arms deals, illegal markets. My uncle Samuel was involved with people like Jonathan Ward, the kind of people who disappear anyone who gets too close. I watched her face as the words sank in, and for the first time since we had met, I saw a crack in her armor. I'm sorry, Amelia, but this is bigger than anything I could have imagined. Your family is tangled up in something dangerous, and I won't let them hurt you. She sat there, silent. As the weight of the truth settled between us, I knew I had crossed a line, but there was no turning back now. The question that hung in the air was simple, but its answer would change everything. Could we face this darkness together, or would the truth tear us apart? The silence between us stretched long, filled with the weight of the truth I had just dumped at her feet. I had told Amelia everything, laid out the tangled web of lies, corruption, and betrayal her family was caught in. And now, I watched her as she absorbed it all, her eyes distant, unfocused. I wish I could tell you that it will be okay, I said quietly, my words hanging in the air. But the truth is, I can't promise you that anymore. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not, and the fight is only beginning. Amelia didn't respond immediately. She was staring at the floor, her fingers absently tapping on the edge of the table. She had always been strong, her resolve unyielding. But I could see the cracks forming now. The weight of everything that had happened, the loss of her father, the revelation of his secrets, the dangerous game we were playing, was pushing her to the brink. "I don't know if I can do this, Logan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep fighting when everything's falling apart." I reached out and took her hand, the familiar warmth of her touch grounding me. "You don't have to do this alone. We've been thrown into this mess together. I won't let them take you from me. I'll fight for you, Amelia. I'll fight for both of us." She looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine, as though weighing my words, trying to find something to hold on to in this whirlwind of chaos. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not even you." I felt the sting of her words, but I knew she was scared. Scared of what the truth meant. Scared of what it could do to both of us. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about who we would become in the process. "You can trust me," I said, my voice raw with sincerity. "I don't have all the answers, but I know one thing. I'm not walking away from you. No matter what happens, I'm with you. I always will be." But just as I thought we were reaching an understanding, a sharp knock on the door interrupted us. It was a forceful knock, one that made my blood run cold. I didn't need to look to know that this wasn't someone here to help. This was it, the moment everything changed. Amelia stiffened beside me. I could feel the tension radiating off her. She knew, just like I did, that things had escalated beyond our control. There was no more running, no more hiding. I stood up, my pulse quickening as I walked toward the door. I didn't know who would be on the other side, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. Slowly, I turned the knob, ready for whatever came next. When the door swung open, the figure standing in front of me wasn't who I expected. It was Ethan, my younger brother, standing in the doorway, his face hard with determination. His eyes flicked to me, then to Amelia, and then back to me, his expression unreadable. "Logan," he said quietly, stepping inside. "We need to talk. Now." I could see the tension in his posture, the way his jaw was clenched. Ethan wasn't one to make a scene, especially not in front of Amelia, but this time it was different. He was holding something back, and I could feel it in the air. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "Why are you here?" He glanced at Amelia briefly, his gaze softening for a moment, but then he turned back to me. "It's about Samuel," he said, his voice low, almost strained. "I've found something. Something you need to see." Amelia's eyes widened, and she stood up, her body rigid. "What do you mean? What have you found?" Ethan hesitated, his hand tightening around a folder he had been holding. "I wasn't sure how to tell you this, but we don't have time. You need to see this, Logan. Now." I took the folder from him, my heart hammering in my chest. It was thick, packed with papers. I tore it open, my hands shaking slightly as I started to read through the first few pages. And then I saw it. Pictures. A photo of Samuel standing with a group of men in a dimly lit room, shaking hands with none other than Jonathan Ward. It was a meeting I never thought I'd see. Samuel, the man I had trusted more than anyone, was shaking hands with the very people my family had spent years hiding from. The ones who operated in the shadows, dealing in arms, illegal trades, and God knew what else. The truth hit me harder than anything I had felt before. Samuel wasn't just corrupt. He was involved. He had been working with people like Ward, the very same men who had been controlling everything behind the scenes, pulling the strings, and using my family to further their own dark agendas. But there was more. In the last few pages of the folder, I found records, legal documents that showed money transfers, offshore accounts, and evidence that Samuel had been laundering money for Ward and others like him. It wasn't just business. It was illegal. My uncle had sold our family's soul to the highest bidder, and in the process, he had pulled me in too. I slammed the folder onto the table, the pieces finally falling into place. "He's been lying to us, Ethan. All these years, he's been feeding us lies. Feeding me lies." Ethan's eyes were dark, his fists clenched at his sides. "I know. And it's not just him, Logan. There's someone else involved. Someone higher up. Someone pulling all the strings. I felt my stomach churn. Who? Ethan's eyes locked onto mine, his voice hard. It's not just about Samuel anymore. It's about the people who've been using him. And now, they know we're onto them. The words hung in the air, thick with the knowledge of what was coming next. Amelia's hand reached out to mine, her fingers trembling. I could feel her fear, her anxiety, but also her resolve. We weren't running anymore. Neither of us were. I looked at Ethan, my brother, the one person I thought I could rely on in all of this. We're in this together, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were heavy with the knowledge that what we were about to face wasn't something we could escape. They won't stop, Logan. Not until it's over. And in that moment, I realized how much we had all underestimated. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a war between family, power, and betrayal. And I wasn't sure who would come out on top. But I knew one thing. I would not let my family, or Amelia, be destroyed by this. It all started to unravel in a way I couldn't control, like the sudden snap of a thread that had been holding everything together. The documents in the folder, the ones Ethan had given me, were only the beginning. The more I looked at them, the more I realized how deeply my family was tied to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just business corruption anymore. It was a criminal empire, a network of power players who had been pulling strings from the shadows, and my uncle had been one of their pawns. But what really gnawed at me wasn't just Samuel's betrayal. It was the idea that I, too, had been complicit in some way. For years, I'd lived under the illusion that my uncle was untouchable, that everything he did was for the good of our family. I'd been blind to the cost, the people who had fallen along the way, and now, Amelia was paying the price. I sat in my office late that night, the only sound being the ticking of the clock. The city stretched out before me, its skyline a jagged reminder of the power that had once felt so firmly in my grasp. But now I was staring at the very real consequences of a life built on lies. Amelia's face haunted me, her confusion, her fear, and her quiet strength. She had been dragged into this world, whether she liked it or not, and I had no idea how to save her from the storm that was about to hit. My phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "Meet me at the old warehouse. It's urgent." I didn't hesitate. I knew whatever was about to happen. I had to face it head on. Amelia wasn't the only one in danger anymore. I was in this too deep now, and there was no way out. Not without ending this. The night was colder than I expected when I arrived at the warehouse. The lights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows against the concrete walls. The place had always been a symbol of power, of influence, but tonight it felt like a tomb, a place where everything went to die. Ethan was already there, standing at the entrance, his posture rigid. He didn't look like the brother I'd grown up with. He looked like a man who had been pushed to his breaking point, a man who had seen too much. "What's going on?" I asked, walking up to him, my voice low, urgent. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed me a small USB drive. His eyes were tired, haunted, as though he'd aged 10 years in the span of a few weeks. "Everything you've been looking for is on here," he said quietly, his voice laced with frustration. "This is what we're dealing with. It's bigger than anything we thought." I plugged the drive into my laptop, and within seconds the files began to download. What I saw made my stomach churn. Videos, pictures, audio recordings, all of them tied to my uncle and the dealings he'd tried to keep buried. But there was something even darker, something I hadn't expected. The footage was of Amelia's father, Maxwell Hale, the man I'd believed was just an innocent professor caught in the crossfire. But the truth was far more complicated. There he was, in a dimly lit room, speaking to Jonathan Ward, the same man who had been pulling the strings behind Samuel's business dealings. Ward wasn't just a criminal, he was a kingpin, and my uncle had been working with him for years. But it wasn't just business. This was personal. They had framed Amelia's father, silenced him, and erased him from history as though he had never existed. The room around me seemed to close in as I watched, unable to look away from the damning evidence. There, in the grainy footage, I saw Samuel Pierce handing over a stack of documents to Ward, proof that he had been laundering money, covering up illegal arms deals, and worse. But it wasn't just about business. It was about lives. People had been erased, families torn apart, all for the sake of money, power, and control. Amelia's father had tried to expose this. He had tried to protect his family, and for that, they had made him disappear. And now, Amelia was the last piece of the puzzle. I closed the laptop with shaking hands, the weight of what I had just seen settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I had been wrong about everything. My uncle wasn't just involved in shady business deals. He was a puppet master in a much darker game. "This isn't just about us, Ethan," I said, my voice low with a cold edge. "It's bigger than we thought. We need to end this. Now." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "I've been trying to protect you, Logan, but this is bigger than both of us. And it's not just your uncle anymore. There are people after us now, people who will do anything to keep their secrets buried." I met his gaze. "Then we'll fight. We expose them all, Ethan. All of it." And that was when I realized what I had to do. I wasn't just protecting Amelia anymore. I was protecting everything that mattered to me, my family, my future, and the woman I loved. The game had changed, and there was no turning back. I turned to Ethan. "Get the word out. Let everyone know what we're about to do. We're bringing everything into the light." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He knew what was at stake. He understood the cost. The battle was just beginning, but I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide behind my family's wealth or power. I had Amelia now, and together, we were going to tear down the empire Samuel had built, piece by piece. And when the dust settled, we'd make sure the truth was all that remained. The night felt like it was closing in around me, the darkness pressing against my chest, suffocating. I had made the decision, but now came the hardest part. The pieces were in place, and the storm I had been avoiding for so long was finally here. I couldn't run from it anymore. I sat in my office, staring out at the skyline of New York City, the city that had been my kingdom, the one I thought I had mastered. But now, as I looked out over the streets, I felt like an outsider in my own world. Amelia's face kept flashing in my mind, her fear, her strength, the way she had trusted me. And I knew, without a doubt, that everything I had done so far had been leading up to this moment. I had to face Samuel. It was time to expose everything. But what would that cost me? I walked over to the safe in the corner of my office, my fingers lingering over the combination. Inside were the final pieces of the puzzle, the records of my uncle's darkest dealings, the ones that Samuel had hoped I would never uncover. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him. Not of anyone. I took the documents out and spread them across my desk. Everything was there. The illegal arms deals, the money laundering, the offshore accounts. And buried in the middle of it all was the name Jonathan Ward. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. Samuel had tied himself to people who didn't just play the game. They owned it. As I examined the documents, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Logan." I looked up to see Amelia, standing in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew, just like I did, that this was the point of no return. I stood up, my heart heavy. "You shouldn't be here. This is getting dangerous." Amelia stepped into the room, her gaze fixed on the papers on my desk. "I'm already in this, Logan. I've been in it since the moment my father tried to expose your uncle. I can't walk away now." Her words were filled with resolve, but I could see the fear behind them. It was the same fear I felt. Fear of what was coming. Fear of what we would have to do to bring the truth into the light. "I won't let them hurt you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to make sure of that." Amelia shook her head, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "You don't have to protect me anymore. We're in this together, Logan. We always have been. I don't want you to carry the weight of this alone." I stepped closer to her, my hand gently brushing her arm. I never wanted this for you. But now that we're this deep, I'm not letting you go. Her gaze softened, but there was no mistaking the strength in her eyes. Then let's finish this together. Her words were like a spark, igniting the fire that had been smoldering inside me. The fight was no longer just about family or money. It was about us, about what we were willing to risk for the truth. And I wasn't going to back down. I turned to the desk, grabbed the folder with the damning evidence, and stuffed it into my briefcase. We need to take this to the authorities. It's time to expose everything. Amelia nodded, her expression set. But Samuel won't go down easily. He's been covering his tracks for years. We have to be careful. I met her gaze, my jaw clenched. We'll be careful. But it's time for him to pay for what he's done. To you. To your family. To everyone he's hurt. We left my office and made our way out into the city. The air was crisp, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I could feel the weight of everything that was about to happen pressing down on me. We were walking into the storm, and there was no turning back. I had always thought I was in control, but now I realized the only thing I had ever really controlled was my fear. And that fear was finally gone. We arrived at the police station, and I could feel the urgency in the air. I walked up to the counter and handed over the documents, my heart pounding. I didn't know if this would be enough to take down Samuel, to end the reign of corruption he had built. But I was done waiting. I was done playing his game. The officer behind the desk looked over the papers, then back at me. This is serious, Mr. Pierce. If this is true, this could take down a lot of people. But you're going to have to give us more than this to move forward. I met his gaze, my voice firm. You've got enough here to start. The rest will come out. But I need you to move quickly. My uncle won't stop until he's destroyed everything. Amelia stood by my side, her hand resting gently on my arm. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her steady presence beside me, like a lifeline. We had come this far together. And now, there was no turning back. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. But with every ounce of my being, I knew one thing. We were going to win. We were going to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but I was done being afraid. And together, Amelia and I were going to tear down the empire that had destroyed her life, and my own. The days after we handed over the evidence felt like a blur. I kept replaying everything in my mind, every decision that had brought us to this point. I couldn't let go of the fear, the uncertainty. What if it wasn't enough? What if we were too late? But Amelia never wavered. Her strength, her quiet resolve, was the anchor I needed. Every time I started to doubt, I looked at her and remembered why we were doing this. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making things right for the people who had been hurt, for the families torn apart by greed and corruption. The phone call came in the middle of the night. I had just fallen asleep, exhaustion pulling at my limbs, when the shrill ring cut through the silence. I shot upright, my heart racing, instinctively reaching for the phone. It was a restricted number. My breath caught in my throat. I knew who it was. Logan Pierce? The voice on the other end was calm but cold, the kind of voice that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Yes, I replied, my voice steady, though my mind was already racing. We have your uncle, Samuel Pierce. We have everything on him. If you want him alive, you'll come alone. The words hit me like a freight train. What do you mean, alive? I asked, my pulse quickening. Where is he? The voice on the other end of the line didn't respond immediately. Instead, it was replaced by a heavy silence. Come alone, the voice repeated. No cops. If you don't, we'll make sure he never speaks again. I didn't wait for another second. I grabbed Amelia's hand, waking her from her sleep, her face flushed with confusion as she looked at me. What's wrong? She asked, her voice filled with concern. They have my uncle, I said, my words cutting through the fog of sleep. They're demanding I come alone. They have him, and if I don't meet their demands, they'll kill him. Amelia's eyes widened, but there was no hesitation in her voice. You're not going alone. I have to. I said, squeezing her hand. This is bigger than us. It always has been. No, Logan, she insisted, her grip tightening around me. You're not facing this alone. I've been a part of this from the beginning, and I'm not backing out now. I knew she was right, but the decision I had to make was still a brutal one. Samuel had betrayed everything, me, my family, and now Amelia. But no matter what he had done, I wasn't going to let him die because of me. The weight of it all hit me in waves, but the course was set. I'll go, I said, my voice firm despite the anxiety that gripped me. But you need to stay here. I can't risk you getting caught up in this any further. Amelia's eyes softened, but there was fire in them too. I'm coming with you, she said, no trace of doubt in her voice. I didn't argue. I knew it was pointless. She wouldn't let me go alone, and I wasn't about to let anything happen to her either. The location they gave me was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place that had once been a thriving business hub, but was now just another forgotten structure, covered in graffiti and decay. We arrived in silence, the only sound being the hum of the engine and our racing hearts. I pulled up to the front, the eerie glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. The place was dead quiet. There was no sign of movement, no guards, no obvious threats. But I knew better. I turned to Amelia, my voice low. Stay close to me. No matter what happens, don't run. She nodded, her expression grave. She wasn't afraid, but the tension in her body said everything. She was ready for whatever came next. We stepped out of the car, and the door creaked closed behind us. The silence was deafening. We moved toward the entrance of the warehouse, and then I saw them. 2 men standing in the shadows, their figures barely visible in the dim light. They stepped forward, blocking our path. Mr. Pierce, one of them said, his voice low and menacing. Your uncle's waiting. I didn't speak. I just followed them as they led us deeper into the warehouse. The air was thick with dust and decay, the walls lined with forgotten crates and broken machinery. But in the center of it all, standing in the middle of the room, was Samuel. He was bruised, bloodied, but alive. Logan. Samuel's voice cracked as he looked at me, his eyes filled with fear and shame. You don't have to do this. You can walk away. It's not too late. We can fix this. I looked at him, my mind filled with the years of manipulation, the lies, the broken promises. You don't get to tell me that anymore, I said coldly, my voice filled with contempt. You made your choices. You sold us out. The leader of the men stepped forward, a gun in his hand. Enough talk. We're done here. You either walk away with your life, Pierce, or you leave with nothing. I turned to Amelia, my heart pounding, knowing what I had to do. Without warning, I lunged forward, knocking one of the men aside, my hand grabbing Samuel and pulling him toward me. Amelia followed, her expression hard, resolute. You've lost everything, I said to Samuel, my voice steady but cold. And now you'll lose even more. You're not going to get away with this. The men stepped forward, but I had already made my move. I grabbed a nearby pipe, swinging it with all my strength, knocking one of them to the ground. Amelia kicked out, taking down another. Samuel stumbled as we fought our way through, and I didn't stop until we were out of the warehouse, back into the safety of the car. As we drove away, the weight of what had just happened hit me like a freight train. I had saved Samuel, but I had done it at a cost. The fight was over for him, but for us, it was just beginning. The men wouldn't stop. They couldn't. But I wasn't running anymore. Not from my family, not from the past. I wasn't running from the truth. We had brought Samuel to safety, but I knew one thing. It wasn't over. The war had only just begun. The pieces were all in place, but the end game was still to come. And no matter how dark the road ahead was, I was going to walk it. With Amelia by my side, we would face whatever came next. The truth was ours now, and nothing could stop us from exposing it. The pieces of the empire Samuel had built, brick by brick, lie by lie, came crumbling down. The truth, in the end, was a weapon more powerful than any fortune could ever be. It was a weapon that freed Amelia from the chains of her past and gave us both the future we had been denied. We didn't win everything, but we won enough. And in the end, The truth was the only thing left standing.